Military Wire with Mike Schindler. You all know this is the podcast where we interview some of America's most elite men and women who have served this country. We share their stories of overcoming, their proven lessons in leadership, and their journey to finding mission and purpose. And I'm super excited about today's guest and today's topic. The topic is veteran employment and the value veterans bring to the marketplace. I think this is relevant to anybody who has ever served this country. And our guest, Dan Goldenberg, who is the Executive Director of the Call of Duty Endowment, is going to unpack this issue for us. Very excited about that. Before I jump into really introducing Dan, though, and his organization, Call of Duty, I want to put a shout-out to this segment's sponsors, Honest Talk International and Circle for Parents. Both these organizations have a vetted network of experts who are standing by to help our listeners navigate issues related to nutrition, fitness, parenting, relationships, intimacy-related issues. So visit their sites, honesttalkinternational.com and circleforparents.com. Dan Goldenberg, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Mike. Great to be here.
Yeah, I love that you're on the show. First of all, I love that you and I share having served the world's greatest Navy, so I just want to put that shout out.
Thanks, shipmate.
Yeah, no kidding. So for our listeners, Naval Academy graduate, he also Harvard Business School grad, a captain in the Navy Reserve. He was named to the Mighty 25 Veterans to Watch in 2017, former corporate senior vice president of growth and partnership services at Frost & Sullivan, which is a global research and management consulting firm. And prior to that, you served as senior director and practice manager at CEB. Great corporate experience, great military experience, and you've got a great quote that I want to share with our listeners. You said, "The leadership, initiative, and creative problem-solving veterans draw from their military service has the potential to transform organizations that hire them." Dan, how did you come to this conclusive statement?
Yeah, Mike, I think it's really from two directions, both quantitatively based and experientially based. On the quantitative side, there's been some great research done by organizations like, for instance, CEB, which is now part of Gartner, where they studied over 1 million Fortune 500 employees, and they were able to distill the differences between veteran and non-veteran employees. And the really interesting thing was you hear about the business case for hiring veterans all the time, and often when you dig into them, it's quite frankly a lot of fluff. This is the exact opposite of that. This is hard numbers. And what CEB learned was that veterans are 4% more productive than non-veterans and 3% more likely to stay. So when you combine those two things, you have a real hard dollar business case for why veterans are a great investment in the contributions they make to your organization. They're going to get more done for you, and they're going to stick around. The sort of experiential side is, after I left the military, I spent a decade in true corporate roles, and I saw the transformational effect skilled leaders could have. And a lot of the leadership qualities we take for granted within the military are not commonly found in the civilian world. There's not a sort of leadership gateway you have to pass through to make it in the corporate world. A lot of it's learned on the fly or perhaps in business schools. But I'll be honest with you, when I went to business school, I didn't learn much about leadership. Everything I've learned about leadership, it really came from my first few years in the Navy, where, as a relatively young person, I had a large amount of responsibility, and the military did a good job giving me the tools that I needed. And these tools are, pretty basic things that sound almost trite to folks who've served in the military. Things like praise in public, criticize in private, focus on the mission, take care of your people. But they're not things you necessarily find commonplace in the corporate sector. So a leader there with those kind of disciplines and experience can really make a difference.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, that's such a great reminder, too, to praise in public, criticize in private. I mean, that was... And you're right. Oftentimes in corporate, we miss that. That is not that's not a trait that's seen throughout corporate America oftentimes. And to your point, we do in fact see it certainly within the military. So, Dan, you lead an organization Call of Duty Endowment, I think in its 10th year. It was the brainchild of Activision Blizzard CEO Bobby Kotick, whose mission has really been to help veterans find high-quality careers by supporting groups to better prepare them for the job market. And you recently released a research study showing that 1/3 of working veterans are underemployed, and a 59% increase in veterans asking for help. So you just framed all the qualities we bring to an organization, yet we've got a good number, a third of these folks that are underemployed, 59% increase in veterans asking for help. Why do you think this is the case?
Well, sure. Let me take a step back first and talk about kind of how we've gotten here. First of all, the U.S. unemployment rate, while interesting, is unfortunately not really representative of the reality on the ground. It's something that's referenced. Oh, look how low veteran unemployment rate is. What determines the U.S. unemployment rate and thereby the veteran unemployment rate is an answer to one question. That question is, last week were you paid for work? Last week were you paid for work? So if you answer that question, yes, you are counted as fully employed. So if you're a guardsman or reservist drilling but don't have a civilian job, you're employed. If you're a barista for 5 hours a week, you're employed. If you mowed your neighbor's lawn for $50, you're employed. So it's not a good measure of employment. A much better measure is understanding, hey, how are people doing financially? How much money are they making? How many hours a week are they working? Compared to their skill set and experience. And when you take a look that way, you get a very different answer. And so we actually were approached by a company called ZipRecruiter, which is one of the largest resume aggregators in the world. And they said, we're seeing a funny thing. We are having far more veterans coming to us, putting their information in their database than we would have expected. In fact, about 500,000 of them. That's more than the U.S. government says are unemployed, and this is just one company, right? So they wanted to understand what was going on, and we were interested in that as well. So we brought in a terrific researcher in the veteran space, fellow vet, by the way, named Phil Carter, and Phil had access to this information and did this analysis that ultimately resulted in the study, and he was able to look at those 500,000 resumes and analyze them and see the difference between how veterans with those resumes and non-veterans were doing and how things were different. And that's how we found out that veterans were working beneath their skill set and experience. And that's really the definition of underemployment. I think how we get there is a lot of transitioning service members don't take their transition seriously enough early enough. And it's likely because they were rode hard, put away wet, and by the time they can actually focus on transition, they realize, wow, I need a source of income, any income, whatever I can get. So they grab that first job, and quite frankly, the resources the Department of Defense, the VA, and the Department of Labor put in front of them through TAP or Transition GPS, it's 100 Marines in a classroom with one or two facilitators. It's not personalized. It's not customized. And it's just insufficient to get you that high-fit job that's going to result in full employment as opposed to underemployment.
Well, this is an interesting point. Now, if I'm not mistaken, SFLF TAP, these programs really start 12 months prior to transition. And so I think DOD would probably argue that, wait a second, we're really preparing these folks, these men and women, for transition and a smooth, or what they call a warm handoff. And what you're finding in the research is that, in effect, really isn't the case. It's too general, and it needs to be more specific. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
There's a lot wrong with it. That's part of it. The fact is, who's administering the system? Well, it's administered by people on active duty, right? So, your company commander may be responsible for that 12-month process. Well, guess what? That company commander has never had to find a civilian job before. And, oh, by the way, they've got a mission to take care of. DOD is about fighting and winning the nation's wars, not about making civilians. So that's the first thing. So believe it or not, that's probably not going to be the first thing on your commanding officer's priority list, is getting you successfully transitioned. It's also not personalized. So let's take a Navy example. In Transition GPS or TAP, your TAP class, you could have an 04 lieutenant commander nuclear engineer, and you could have a bosun's mate, E4 bosun's mate, with radically different skill sets and experiences in education. They're given the same transition program, right? Chances are that lieutenant commander is going to find a great job no problem, right? But that E4 is probably going to need a lot more help. It doesn't matter. They get the same transition experience. It just doesn't make any sense. I think they give you some good basic starting information, but one, as an individual, you have to be ready to take it seriously, and two, it needs to be customized to your needs, and that's really where the partners we work with at the Call of Duty Endowment, that's where these 9 U.S. organizations and 2 in the U.K., by the way, are so great. They step in to give that personalized attention at zero cost to the service member or veteran because we cover all those costs. And they can give you that personalized attention that you need and make sure you're focused on your transition. You kind of need a battle buddy, a running mate for us squids. You need someone to make sure you're tracking because you have a day job you have to take care of. And you need someone who kind of knows that world and is going to keep you on track.
That's an interesting, and I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, you shared a couple different things, and I really want to unpack this. Your study shares that, veterans tend to leave their first jobs after military service faster than non-veterans leave their first jobs. And I think part of it is you attributed that to the fact that they don't take their transition seriously. And they're also waking up to the fact that, oh my gosh, I'm getting out, I've got kids, I've got a wife, I've got rent, I got car payment. My capacity to find that career is small at this point because I'm a bit desperate. So how do our men and women break that cycle of, listen, I'm going to take the first job knowing that I'm going to probably leave it. At least that's what the research says. So how do you break that cycle? Is it working with these partners that you guys work with?
Yeah, it absolutely is. Just as one example, the average, first of all, it starts with us defining what is a quality job, right? I've heard people throw around terms like, 21st century jobs and all that. Well, I'd argue a great 21st century job is being a plumber. If you've had to hire a plumber lately, they do all right financially. They can't be offshored. The average age of plumbers in this country is like 58. So, there's plenty of room. You can run your own business. It's not necessarily working with robots. And by the way, that can't be replaced by artificial intelligence. So, what is a quality job? But in all seriousness, we look at 3 factors. We look at a salary, we look at retention rates, and we look up at full-time versus part-time. So our partners have landed jobs just last year. The average starting salary was over $58,000. 6 months after placement, 87% of those vets were still in those jobs. 12 months, it was 80%. And as far as full-time, 93% of those roles were full-time. So those are the kind of benchmarks we go after. I would also mention, while the Department of Labor does their best, they don't measure those things on the jobs you're placing vets into. A job is a job, and we respectfully disagree.
Well, I think you're spot on about that. And what I also love is your cost per placement in 2018 was $522. I mean, that's pretty impressive.
Thank you. It's, our partners do better every year. If we just focused on cost, we wouldn't be doing our mission. But the lower the cost, the more vets we can help find jobs. So that's why it's important to us. And our partners work with a whole spectrum of vets, from those who are transitioning service members. A good example there is Hire Heroes USA. They're amazing working with transitioning service members. They're getting on bases. They're doing these small workshops. So instead of 100 vets, 100 transitioning service members in a room with one facilitator, there's one facilitator for 3 or 4 service members sitting in the room. So they get that personalized attention, and it's followed up by counseling until these individuals get jobs. We have other organizations like KC, Corporate America Supports You, who focus especially on guardsmen and reservists. And then we have a bunch of different organizations that focus on what we call high barrier to employment veterans, those who have, challenges beyond just getting a job, be it mental health, physical health, or housing or whatnot. So they're giving even more personalized, more holistic attention to ensure that. But ultimately, I think these when you're transitioning out or a veteran out already, to land in that job that's going to be a good fit, you need someone who's objective, who knows what the job market's like, who has relationships with employers, and is going to help you answer 3 questions. You need to have an effective job search. You need to be able to answer 3 questions. Where do I want to live? What industry do I want to work in? And what function do I want to perform within that industry? And most people don't have too hard time figuring out what their geography is going to be, though data tells us that most transitioning service members tend to either stay where they left the military or go back to where they came from. So that's useful to know. But geography is the first one. Industry, that's really, do I want to be in healthcare? Do I want to be in aerospace? Do I want to be in security? Whatever it is. Function is the one that tends to be the hardest for veterans to figure out, because it's really, if you ask a civilian what does a bosun's mate do, what does a bosun's mate do, they're going to have a hard time answering that question. Well, you ask your typical transitioning service member, what does a marketer do, they probably won't have a clue either, right? So it's really gaining an understanding of that. So if you can triangulate on those three things, you're probably in pretty good shape for looking for a job and assessing whether you're ready to get one of those jobs. Maybe you need an internship, maybe you need more experience, maybe you need some more education, or maybe you're ready, but you need someone to help you navigate that personally. And that's why our partners have been so successful at this.
Well, and I think what people need to pay attention to, and Dan, I want to reiterate this point again, because I think it's so important for our listeners, is Code, you guys and your partners have been responsible for 93% of job placements that were full-time work. And 80% of those 6-month retention rates, or 87%. So that means that you guys are really, you're aligning mission, purpose, and values for these individuals into the right companies, and they're viable jobs. And I think that's the point that you're driving home. The other part, and I know we kind of joked about the plumber, but I got to tell you, I think I'm on the same boat with you in this. I have talked to a number of men and women and said, listen, if you're going to pick a profession, you should be an electrician or a plumber, because those trades are high paying and there's such a need. I mean, think about it. I don't know that I can do electrical work anymore, and God knows I hate doing plumbing work, and I'm willing to pay for it. And I think more and more people are going that route, when we look up. So do you guys work in those fields at all, or is that...
Absolutely.
Yeah, right?
Absolutely. In fact, there's a nonprofit we've recently connected with. Just to give you an example, one I'm super bullish on. So let's talk about high-tech manufacturing jobs. There's supposedly almost 1 million unfilled high-tech manufacturing jobs in this country. They pay very well. It's in many ways the future of our economy, and yet there's 1 million unfilled jobs. Why is that? Well, there's not a lot of young Americans who either want to do that kind of work or have, because you do need some basic level of education. You have to be able to do math, to be able to fill these roles. There's an organization called Workshops for Warriors out of San Diego. They're amazing. Unfortunately, they have a wait list for vets who want to do this work, but they teach them additive manufacturing, so that's like 3D printers, all kinds of high-tech welding and everything. And they have 100% placement rate. And these are companies like Tesla and SpaceX and GE, companies that really value this. And, the jobs are there. And this training program, of course, vets being vets, they get them through this program in about half the time of civilian programs. Because we know how to train people, right? So, there's an appetite. Employers snatch these vets right up, and there's an ability for vets to get this kind of training. But you have to have the desire to do it, obviously. And again, like the trades you mentioned, plumbing, electrical, the people doing that work are getting older and older, and there's not a lot of backfill in on the horizon. So I think there's great opportunity in those roles as well, and they pay well, and there's a lot of job security.
Oh, man, I love that. So, I know we're getting close to our time. So, what advice, Dan? You're working with companies, you're working with veterans. So, I want to bifurcate these two. What advice do you have for companies looking to hire veterans?
Yeah. So, the biggest advice I would say is, veterans' resumes look different, and I think that becomes a barrier. It's really important for veterans to know the purpose of a resume is to kick a door open. It's to give you the opportunity to interview. That's what the point of a resume is. And so the organizations we work with, we encourage vets to go to our website, click on the Veterans tab, and we can get help, link you up with the right partner there. But it's basically your calling card. It's your marketing device to sell yourself into a company and why they should give you an interview. So the companies, we say, be be open-minded with these resumes. Give qualified veterans. We never advocate hiring anyone who isn't qualified. We definitely want you to hire the best person. But give qualified veterans a chance. The resume is a little different, but it's clear they have the basic skill sets. Give them a chance to interview. Vets will tend to do very well in interviews from the data we've seen, but they need that opportunity. They need to be able to get in the door and explain why their skills are relevant. And if you're worried about being able to explain that, you can work with, or from a veteran standpoint, you can work with our partners to do that. From a company standpoint, you can also work with our partners, and they're listed on the partners tab of the Call of Duty Endowment website. These organizations will work with you to help you understand these veterans and why their experience is relevant to you. So really, my big ask of companies is give them a chance to interview for these roles. They won't disappoint you.
And what about for transitioning service members? You said, number one, they don't start soon enough. What else do they need to be paying attention to and doing?
Well, get your battle buddy, get your running mate, and, whether that's a vet who's already transitioned that use LinkedIn. Veterans generally don't have very good networks. You need to build one. LinkedIn's the best way to do it, in my opinion. And don't be afraid to reach out, especially to fellow veterans, for help. Find someone on LinkedIn who's doing what you want to do and reach out to them. There's great, if like I said, I encourage you to work with our partners, but there's some great resources out there. There's a site called Veterati, Veterati, and they will connect you with a mentor in the industry you're interested in for free, who's volunteered to help transitioning service members. So get out there, talk to people who are doing what you want to do. That's incredibly powerful advice. But you need kind of a forcing mechanism. It might be your spouse, it might be like you said, a battle buddy, or one of the organizations we work with to stay on you to make sure you have a transition plan that makes sense for you as an individual, not one you get from being in a classroom with 100 other folks.
That's such great advice, Dan. So how do people find you and your partners? How do they find the Call of Duty, and how do they get connected with you guys?
Yeah, so just go to callofdutyendowment.org. So that's .org, and you can click on the veteran tab, and you'll see veteran support, or you can click on our partners to check out the 11 different nonprofits we currently work with. But we are here to help you. We're also on Facebook and Twitter.
Oh, wonderful. Dan, again, thanks for being on the show. Grateful for what you guys are doing. Such great success. Listeners, be sure that you check these guys out, callofdutyendowment.org. Don't delay. Make sure that your transition is purposeful. Make sure you get transitioned into that job and continue to adding value to this country. Dan, again, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks so much, Mike.